First of all, like Zoya, I really appreciate you being here, sitting down with me and chatting. I know we've kind of circled this a little bit and had to reschedule once already, so I appreciate your flexibility.
Of course, anytime.
Um, yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I know, you doing a little bit of research about you and your company. You left a 20-year career in tech to build your company, Orgo. That's not a small decision. That's something I want to definitely dive into a little bit and unpack. But before we get into that and kind of go too far back in your story, I just kind of want to ground everybody a little bit in what you're building. So for somebody who is listening, who's never heard of Orgo, let's just start with sort of the basics. What is it? Who is it for? And what problem are you solving for people?
Absolutely, Dan. I really appreciate the opportunity to share. So, welcome directly and indirectly to Orgo. Organization on the Go is what it stands for. And it stems and is inspired by a very personal problem that I continue to experience within my very own home as as a parent of three athletes. So, I've got three girls, now ages 15, 11, and 8, and they do year-round sports. They swim competitively. We get like maybe 2 weeks off for the whole year between all the different, seasons, long course, short course, etc. We've got travel, club lacrosse, and soccer. We've got track, we've got acro, a whole bunch of things they tell us to do. Don't specialize, so we do all the things, right? So no different than I'm sure many of the families that may be listening in.
Yeah.
And so experiencing that, but sitting in the enterprise side of my career for the 20 years that I'd been there, it started to slowly creep in more and more and more into the day-to-day and became more and more complex with each commitment that we had made, to the point where I kind of, picked my head up one day and was like, why does this feel so hard?
Yeah.
Why is managing logistics of youth sports the biggest bane of my existence? Why isn't my kind of complex role on paper leading and overseeing large enterprise tech stacks and thinking about banking systems and stuff? Like, why doesn't that take up more of my brain cells than, the day to day? And so kind of backed into this realization that the best of tech is always built for B2B and SaaS, which is why I never felt that pain. But in the home, as it were, consumer tech, and especially within fam tech, that is an ongoing challenge.
Yeah.
So kind of started to really appreciate as to why we're here, kind of, why that feels different and maybe why that should change. So the vision for Orgo is really one that's stemming from the word logistics, and truly honors the fact that we, specifically sports families, but many others as well, we're out of the home a lot. And so a lot of the home-based organizational tools and solutions that I had always within my toolkit started to run short, in that to-dos and chores and lists and recipes and things like that didn't apply to me when I was 3 hours away or a 3-day tournament. And, between my three kids, we were always tripping up on something. I'm like, I need more, something that really kind of matches the complexity of the life that we've started to lead. And so started to envision a different calendar, frankly, which is not a business I wanted to get into, but kind of felt myself being in need of, and a calendar, one that visualizes time as I actually spend it in the real world. And for me, that meant having that extra layer of detail, the very one that I would be kind of always parent mathing myself into, or those T-minus calculations. And so I said, okay, what if I have a calendar tool and a platform that recognizes time the way we actually spend it, with prep time and travel time and early arrival and travel time back and carpool drivers, like all of those extra dimensions that seem to surround this fairly innocuous event called soccer game from 3 to 4 p.m. on a Saturday, right? Because it's never 3 to 4. It's like 12 to 5. And so let's lay that out as it really is. And let's start to kind of inform some decision-making, conflict avoidance, change management, all those great enterprise principles, but like apply them onto a platform that can sustain that change. So over time, that's exactly what we built. Orgo, it's a calendar app, a logistics platform that shows time as you actually spend it. You can import all of your schedules and events into it from team apps, as well as your Google, your Apple, and your Outlook calendars. And we will transform those events into our logistics, exactly as described, with all those extra elements. And then you can include that for your whole family. You can add your caregivers in there, your parents, your spouse, your partner, your kids as well. And everybody's on the same page. We send notifications, time to start preparing, time to start driving, X much has changed. This driver assignment, has been accepted, and so forth. And then by the time you go and execute, you have that clarity and control in hand. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, I have two little kids, 5 and 3. So we're not quite into the intense, like era of like constant like sports, but they're starting to get into it. Like this, it's so funny. Like we're talking today because this weekend is one of the first weekends that we looked and we were like, my wife and I were sort of like looking at our, skylight calendar, and we're okay. We've got a lot, and it's great to keep organized, but I think the stuff you're talking about is the logistics of like, yeah, you can have the calendar and it says when the stuff is at. But we need a separate like little strategy meeting of like, okay,
Yeah.
who's going to do soccer? Because after soccer, we won't have time to get across town to the dance recital, and so that's literally our weekend this weekend. So I have a lot of questions about the product and the company, but before that, I find it's sort of just as interesting and relevant for people to like hear a little bit of your story, and you can go back as far as you'd like. I mean, you do have a very interesting background, immigrant family and coming to the US and your whole career in tech. So why don't we just kind of go back as far as you kind of think is relevant in your story? Because I am kind of curious of sort of like your early career and kind of upbringing, and how much of that do you think at the time were you thinking that you'd be an entrepreneur someday and starting a company, or is that something that came later? So feel free to kind of go back as far as you want in your story to kind of give people an idea of kind of your journey, what led you here.
Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah.
We'll go back.
Yeah.
We'll go to the origin story. We'll go back. So yeah, I immigrated here from the Ukraine when I was 9. The story goes, and the facts were, we had $8 in our pocket.
Yeah.
Those are facts. And so, we kind of came here with nothing. It was just my mom and I, but she was a computer programmer. She was an engineer by trade.
Mm-hmm.
She was immediately able to get work because that was the .com era, right? Like that was the boon. There was a lot of Eastern European talent that was kind of funneling into tech at the time. And so she was part of that wave, luckily and strategically, as a result of that. And so that was kind of the way of survival and a path forward. But as a result of that, tech had become part of my DNA pretty early on. So we had a PC in the home for those necessity reasons pretty early on. And so I just really kind of caught the bug. And having a female and a woman leader in tech was such a taboo, but not for me. That was my norm. That was just my mom.
Yeah.
Like she was going to work every day. That was normal. So when the time came for me to possibly pursue that, it just was such a no-brainer. You do not disappoint your first generation immigrant mom. Like you just don't, go against the grain on that. But I just felt like it was a natural extension, what I'd become so comfortable and accustomed to, that yes, let me go ahead and kind of, continue the legacy from there. So that at least explains a little bit of the tech path. But the sports piece is a little more, I guess, ethereal and less linear. And so, I lived in Brooklyn for all of those early years, but for high school, freshman year summer before freshman year, moved to suburbia New Jersey. Okay. And that was like immigration number 2, because I'm like, okay, city setting, latchkey kid, like literally survival mode all day, every day. And then landing into a completely different, environment and not having necessarily those social norms. And the first thing that I observed pretty early on was that everybody had been friends with everyone since kindergarten. They had been on like little preschool soccer teams. And, by that point, freshman year, those relationships are pretty solid. Yeah. And I started to observe other things like, whoa, they've got physical skills, social skills, executive skills. Like, where are those stemming from? Maybe because they were in team settings since an early age. Maybe they had developed that kind of, that conflict resolution muscle that perhaps I had, done so slightly differently. So it stayed with me that when my parental era comes of having, my own kids, I'm like, I'm going to invest in this thing called youth sports. Yeah. Like I'm going to do that with my kids when the time comes. Of course, so much of it has changed in terms of the intensity and, the pressures and all the things that come with it then. But even then, I just remember kind of earmarking that to be like, those are some really great things that the kids are growing up with. Yeah. So a little bit of some of those early parallels.
Yeah. Now, did you have a chance to play any sports? Like what was your sort of relationship with team sports or individual sports or any of that?
So I actually used to dance competitively in ballroom, as most Russian young people did at the time. It was a very serious sport. Yeah. And so that all had to end when we moved because for various reasons, like there were no studios around, and if they were, like we were living on $20 a week. Like no one is putting me up for dance lessons. at the time. But so when we moved to suburbia, I came out for the tennis team and I ran track, which were very safe individual sports. But the team dynamic is what gave me
Mm-hmm.
pause. Like I just wasn't able to inject myself in such a way that made me feel comfortable or ready for that, because I had seen how much of that preceding experience these kids all had. And I didn't think that my,
Mm-hmm.
coming into that necessarily was matching it. So it was interesting to think back on it.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that, today our three girls, like, yes, they swim, which is a individual sport, but they all do team sports as well, is because I'm like, you need that conflict, you need that physicality,
Mm-hmm.
you need that team construct. So I'm always trying to, advocate for striking that balance between the two.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you started your career, obviously you had, some kind of firsthand experience of being around tech, and
Yeah.
um, like you said, sounded like that was probably an area that you just felt very comfortable and natural and like interest in. And when you started your career, um, what was how did you see your career going at that point when you were kind of getting started in the tech world?
Sure. So I went to Rutgers and um, I took those traditional courses in the beginning, right? It's like
Yeah.
your CS, intro this and intro that. I'm like, okay. So it wasn't like going well for me. Like I wasn't getting it. And everyone, in these huge, large lecture halls, there's like 500 kids in the room and they like all knew C already, like C++.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what am I missing? Like this is an intro, right? Like
Yeah.
you guys already know how to do all this stuff. So
Yeah.
I struggled a little bit, but luckily freshman year, as I was trying to kind of question, I'm like, is this really for me? Am I already behind in some way? There was an alternate path into tech that Rutgers was good enough to roll out called Information Technology and Informatics, ITI. It was a brand new program at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they were experimenting with it basically to recognize that the industry is strictly not surrounding just the coding aspect, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not just that you're, a computer programmer.
Yeah.
Like there were other aspects of the business. There was network and, design and quality assurance and project management, all these things. And so they kind of wanted to put out a more rounded program. So I dove right into that. It was a cohort that was experimental and I got into that. So that was a lifeline. And I don't know if I would have stayed in the more traditional side of things had that not been available. So dove right into that. And the construct was interesting too, is that they allowed and really encouraged for us to kind of get out into the work environment
Mm-hmm.
between summers and winter breaks. And so I'd taken advantage of that. And I was a consultant because they didn't have internships for MetLife,
Yeah.
where I was like boots on the ground, doing QA work, doing, some project management type stuff, just kind of helping out some of the folks that, those are their full-time jobs. And I was
Mm-hmm.
just kind of shadowing them. And I just remember getting that real-time experience hands-on and bringing that back into the classroom and then mapping those concepts back to what I've actually seen in the industry.
Yeah.
And then that started to have a compounding effect. And I accelerated my coursework because, I'm like type A. And I graduated early by 6 months because I realized that the way that the budget cycle works is like there are no roles available at scale in June.
Mm-hmm.
The budget is available up in January. So how can I align myself to be available and kind of
Yeah.
step into some of those roles at that time? And that's how it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really interesting because I think back to when I was in college, I sort of found marketing pretty quickly that like I really enjoyed it. But at that time, computer science, like technology in general, it was, really at the time, just probably kind of what you're talking about, coding and sitting there all day and coding and building, there weren't even apps then, but like building websites and other technology products and that.
By hand in Notepad.
Yeah.
Syntax mattered. You had to I would literally sit there painstakingly and dream of code and wake up in the morning, couldn't wait to drive to the office because we all did.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't wait to compile and try and troubleshoot. And then you'd get the error again. You're like, yeah, damn it.
Yeah.
You try it again.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
wild.
But I think about that a lot. If I had been, maybe going to school, or if I was 10 years younger, and how much tech sort of exploded in that 10-year difference, I might have found something more in the tech world that I was maybe more drawn to. And I talk about this all the time because my dad comes from the insurance world. He was an actuary. And so he was like, not a tech guy, but he does a lot of coding and, things like that for fun. And we also had like one of the early computers when nobody else had one. So like I was always around it, but I never found, any real area within tech that I was passionate about. But and then when you were kind of starting your career, it's also funny that you very consciously made that choice to kind of graduate in December. I was the other way around. I stayed an extra 6 months just because.
Same cycle, extra 6 months.
Yeah. And then I don't know if that was good or bad, because I think it was right around the housing crisis that I was like looking for a job, and there was, it was very hard to find a job, but I kind of got lucky. But then when you kind of started your career, at that time, like what was kind of your role? What were you drawn to? And again, the question I asked you earlier is like, this whole time, did you feel any of that entrepreneurial sort of itch, or did that come later?
Okay, so I'll answer that in the reverse order.
Yeah.
Never would I ever have been thought to have pursued like an entrepreneurial founder seat.
Yeah.
In fact, God forbid, because you need corporate and you needed safety, and I wasn't going to give my mom an extra set of reasons to to not follow the path. And so, yes, I was very, very intentional and kind of pursuing and jumping readily, clearly, and early into corporate. And so I was fortunate enough to have invested in that life at the time with those recurring roles that I would come back into both summer and winter. So I'd established those relationships. And yes, an opportunity for a role opened right at the time that I was, kind of planning my early graduation. And so, yes, that's exactly how that happened. But those roles were early, and they were formidable, and they were foundational. And I would never take them back. So to the point you're making, like, oh, maybe, had tech moved 10 years, later, I argue that the basic, most like roll up your sleeves and do the work yourself type opportunities that like grinded us out is what's serving me every single day. It's the foundation where you think critically, because the dying, breed of QA as an example. And if anybody's out there who's ever performed quality assurance, like, bless you. It's the most important work.
Yeah.
UAT, understanding how things work end to end. Business analysis, writing and translating business logic, outcomes, and intent into programmatic, instructions and outcomes for the developers. That's all the work that I was doing. And then that eventually grew into project management, where you're like, all right, let me oversee that end to end. Let me go ahead and like overlay some leadership capabilities that started to develop over time. And that was the exact progression. So I did some development work early on. It was proprietary language on a platform that we brought in. So I kind of had to like learn it soup to nuts. And then that was the compiling and the coding that I was referring to that like plagued me every night to try and crack the code.
Yeah.
Feeling the fruits of that very direct labor, catching the bug of like, wow, there is an answer. I need to come at this thing, in a variety of different ways, but there is an answer. And fighting for that. And then just, overseeing large teams over time, and just like, being part of M&A had been opportunities along the journey, which I loved, being on the deal team, buy side, sell side, evaluating opportunities, doing due diligence, kind of like looking across the enterprise, bringing teams forward out of M&A into more of the integration, like post acquisition phase, and even IPOing, taking those teams all the way through. So like seeing the full gamut, super, super basic, all the way up to like, the highest echelon of where a business can perform as an organization is just the full gamut. So I wouldn't shortcut any one of those. And because we've got AI now at our fingertips, many will shortcut that and don't have the need to step through all of those basics. But I think they've served me well.
Yeah. I my first like career move for me, my first like real job, I guess, was at a marketing agency, and we did like a lot of like email marketing and direct mail marketing, which has kind of always been around. And I remember like the really early years, I was spending lots of time just like proofreading copy, and like, so like it's so funny to think back of like, oh, if we had AI then, like, first of all, I would not have been doing that because I would have been using AI. But I think there's a lot that, you learn from those roles. And then as you progress through your career, obviously, getting to take on more roles and probably more clarity around where you want your career to go. Was all of this in kind of the fintech space, whether or not they used the the name for the category at the time. That was kind of where you were working, right?
It was FinServ, financial services,
Sure.
a little InsurTech, a little MarTech, a little SaaS. I've jumped out several times and got sucked right back into the banking vortex,
Yeah.
especially living in, kind of the New York area. There's always no shortage of those
Hmm.
opportunities. But yes, it was always around that. So, kind of coming back to this whole entrepreneurial chapter, when I was ready to jump out and I did self-select, I voted myself off the island. I'm like, okay, it was at the 20th mark. And I cite that number very intentionally because even looking back to that, I'm like, how's it been 20 years? I'm like 20 in my mind. Like, how
Yeah.
has this happened?
Yep.
But it had been that many years because I've been doing it for so long since
Hmm.
college, effectively. So at that 20th mark, I'm like, okay, listen, I think I've seen pretty much everything that I need to see within this industry. Like, let's
Hmm.
kind of make a jump and argue that there's, other opportunities and things. And I started to develop this FOMO around AI, of course, 3 years ago, two and a
Hmm.
half. DeFi, Web3, all these like truly innovative leaps that we as a people
Yeah.
were making. And especially as this technologist, I'm like, I will never touch that in FinServe. I will never have the opportunity to like really affect and play.
Yeah.
So that was one of the reasons for pursuing, something else as an entrepreneur. I just didn't think that the something else was going to be, this. I
Hmm.
thought I was like, all right, let's go build a fintech. Like
Yeah.
that's the world I know, right? Let's go solve some problems. But I was also like, I don't know if we need another like payment platform. I don't know if that's what I'm like
Yeah.
pining for every day. Logistics of youth sports apparently kept kind of pulling me back into a reminder of where pain really lies.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of a little bit of an unexpected turn there. But there was always an entrepreneurial spirit. And I think that's an important thread to also weave that no, despite the corporate roles that I kept pursuing, there were always faced with some unknown. There was always some transition, some like major progressive step that the organization was ready to take. And I was a little bit of like a special teams, right?
Hmm.
Like, I don't really know what is happening or like who all needs to do what, but like, let's assemble a team. She's got it. She could figure it out. We'll take it from there. So I took great pride in being entrepreneurially kind of spirited, but always protected by a bigger umbrella. Never really took the risk,
Yeah.
coming out on my own. But that's probably the biggest change agent, obviously, in this particular chapter, but always feeling like, listen, if there's something that we don't know, we're going to figure it out and we'll surround ourselves with an amazing team. We'll source expertise. We'll, collaborate with a diverse set of opinions and perspectives, and we'll kind of push through the unknown.
Yeah. And then you were obviously drawn to this very real problem of like families and sports and scheduling and organization and logistics, and you wrap all that up into one ball. Do you, as you're talking, I'm curious how you feel about this. Do you find that like working on the corporate side or big enterprise, solutions, like founders and people in business always say, you have to go out and you have to solve problems. Like that's the whole kind of point of what you're doing for people. Do you feel, was there a little bit of a pull to go for that more immediate, like I can solve a problem for this specific group? You're much closer to it because we work
Yeah.
on huge teams, huge companies. Yeah, you're still solving problems, but it can feel so distant and I don't know, maybe that's why I sort of also kind of left the corporate like agency world, because when I can work with clients much more closely on a more one-to-one basis, it just feels so much more rewarding that it feels more tangible that you're solving that problem.
Yeah.
Were you feeling that as well?
Nail on the head.
Okay.
Hit the nail on the head. Aside from the FOMO of like, oh, cool techie stuff, I think the bigger burning kind of desire was to affect change directly. And not because, either one of us was power hungry. It's like you were so far removed from the thing that you were so, impassioned to spend all of this time doing and working on and fighting so hard for these decisions to be made and for the advocacy of the thing that you think is right. By the time, if ever,
Yeah.
it would even reach an outcome, forget the ROI, forget even like, even understanding the impact and the measurability of that one thing. That's what was really daunting is I needed that one-to-one relationship. Effort made, impact exerted, outcome measured,
Yeah.
come back in a circle, in a loop, do that again, move the needle in some measurable way, whatever that thing is. But being in that cycle and feeling the impact of time spent
Hmm.
and, effort made, that's probably the thing that I was hungriest. And because I experienced that so early on, especially from like a developer perspective, is that I could stay the night and wake myself up in the middle of the night with these solutions and come immediately into the office, try that thing and see an outcome of it,
Mm-hmm.
and feel the satisfaction of either that breakthrough or just knowing that more work is ahead. So being in the loop is what I miss most, and it's exactly the nail that you've hit right there. Is something that we as founders have the distinct pleasure and plague,
Yeah.
like we're both, it's a double-edged sword for sure. It's like you carry the load of all of that. If somebody cancels a subscription or
Mm-hmm.
leaves the business, whatever it is, and you're like, okay, so we're going to take that very, very directly and personally.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is something that I can do
Yeah.
to at least try and affect that.
Yeah. And the thing I think about all the time is when we used to, like, earlier in my career, people would talk about like work-life balance,
Hmm.
and I remember in my agency days working for big agencies here in Chicago, big clients, but giant teams, and there'd be times where I'd be busting my ass and I'd be like working really late, and then I would feel good and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm really contributing. But then I would have
Your
these.
medal was in the mail. It was
Yeah,
coming.
right, right.
Yeah.
But then I had this like moment where I realized, like, did all of this like extra work that I'm
Mm.
clearly invested in, and like, did it have an impact? And I'm like, I think
Mm.
it did, but I don't really know for sure. And then now fast forward 8 years, and if I'm working on something I'm really passionate about for a client or myself, and I'm working late, and I guess you could call that maybe not work-life balance, but it
Yeah.
was fulfilling and rewarding and energizing, and I could see the impact. And so I feel like that's another kind of way of saying the same thing that maybe you were noticing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, time spent, right? Like it becomes more, I don't know, the equation, it's not that it's balanced, it's just more proportional. Like effort put in
Yeah,
equals and or in some, balancing variable equation into potential outcome. And one that you would choose every day. No one is forcing you in this entrepreneurial kind of journey, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that we should be doing
yeah,
and we are doing for the benefit of the business, but you choose to do so. You create your own problems, you go after those solutions, you try to figure out what's next and so forth, but it is a choice.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And then all of the founders that I talked to and the companies kind of building solutions for families, or caregivers, a lot of it, the thing that I just really enjoyed, like, being around that, is like almost always it comes from like some lived experience of a problem, and then you're going to go solve that problem. Now, that's not exclusive to famtech. That happens everywhere, but it's very different than a founder who just says, oh, AI just
Mm.
blew up and it's everywhere. There's an opportunity. I can go create this company and solve a bunch of problems, make a bunch of money. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But when it's lived experience, a problem
Yes.
that you've been through, to me, that's where uh, it's just much like you can connect the dots much more with a founder that's passionate about that. So when, kind of in your story, were you starting to feel that sort of lived experience pain point that ultimately, kind of led you to start the company?
It was being lived all along up
Yeah.
until like kind of like the clarity of that aha moment. And I think that really the vision and the requirements, if you will, for Orgo and the product have been inevitably developed along the way. I remember I was driving, to various tournaments and practices and games and such with my husband. And we just would always say these things like, well, what if? I wish that. And why can't?
Yeah.
Right. You kind of throw these phrases out. And if you do so over and over and over again, there's these recurring themes that emerge. And
Yeah.
you're like, and as a technologist, I'm like, bro, we can do that. Like, that's not a thing that doesn't necessarily exist. And then I became mad. Like, first it was an observation, and then it was a frustration, and then there was action,
Yeah.
right? So in the frustration phase of it all, it was like, well, why doesn't do this thing? It seems so tangible
Yeah.
because that lived experience had become repeatable. And I'm like, I'm not special. I'm not unique. I'm looking around every single person around me that is on this, what I call active parenting phase journey, where we're at it, by the way, for the
Yeah.
longest of our parenting, end to end. That there's the infant and the newborn and the toddler stuff. All of that fades, and you're definitely entering into the next. And then the next is there for the foreseeable 15 years.
Yeah.
and you stack that across, multiple kids, you could be on this journey for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I just don't see myself doing this on repeat, specifically the backwards math and, the jump, the mental gymnastics that we were doing. I'm like, this is inefficient and it's frustrating me and
Yeah.
it's pissing me off. And maybe there's a brighter vision for that. So it was not enough to just observe the problem. It was not until like the potential solution of what's different and what could be started to crystallize that it's probably one that probably triggered, action at that point. But
Yeah.
without that clarity, given my risk aversion,
Yeah.
I never would have been like so compelled as to go forth and pursue it.
Yeah.
God, no, not even leave my paycheck for that.
Yeah. Did that happen pretty quickly? Kind of going from the observation to, okay, let's take some action, or was that kind of a slow burn?
It was a slow burn and I needed prompting. Like it was so unfathomable for me to even change something about the trajectory that I've been. Mind you, at that point, I was on the title that I want, there were things that I've been fighting for and working for my whole career, and I could have like taken the next leap. And so it was just like being at the cusp of that and then just challenging it to be like, well, what if you don't? And you completely come to zero.
Yeah.
Like do a whole thing all together. And so I credit my husband fully for just kind of going ding and just like pushing me off the mountain, because I had climbed that mountain and looked over the edge and been like, I think I see some things here. And he was like, bye, it was a family decision for sure. It's a lot of risk. It's a lot of time. It's a fourth baby that's being birthed with so much time, more than arguably the first three, in terms of the effort, the emotion, the focus, the time, but it's to get something off the ground.
Yeah. So let's go back to that moment. When you kind of were pushed off that cliff in a loving way and say, okay, we're going to do this. What was step one? What was the kind of the first thing you did?
Okay. So definitely measured steps, right? So here I go again with my analytical brain. I'm like, there is no way we're jumping to outcomes here and being like, oh, it's a great system, we're going to do these things. Like that clarity was not even that much in hand yet. It was all about what's now, next, and later. The now was like, okay, let me go and like have a conversation. Once again, coming back to that diversity of thought, like let someone challenge it. Let someone say, oh, no, I'm already using something. Maybe I've not looked far and wide enough to be able to recognize that there was something already out there. And this is just, a pipe dream and it's fine. So the first thing I did was I reached out to a prior colleague of mine whose opinion I held in high esteem, who's a fellow technologist who happened to be local to the area. Like, let me grab you a cup of coffee. Let's just sit down. I want to, bounce some things off of you. An NDA was signed and a conversation was had. So just kind of, throwing it back and forth. He was a technologist. He was also a coach and a parent, and one who I thought would be able to like very personally relate to that problem. And so at the end of the conversation, 2 hours later, as the story goes, I had a co-founder. And the way that moment happened, or one of the co-founding team members, I should say, the way it happened was that he was personally drawn into the problem. He identified with the challenges that I was describing. He also had related to the questions I was asking. My frustrations had became over time, perhaps his, by way of that conversation. He was like, oh yeah, I never thought about that. Like, oh, that does suck. Like, oh no, we could probably think of something better. And then that compelled him to want to leap into action alongside me. So total kismet. Just one of those moments that if you never take the shot, if you don't have that conversation, you never know what lies on the other side of it. So then continuing with that, we assembled a small team of what I call doers, right? Like we were all ready to roll up our sleeves. I myself in a full-time capacity at that time, and then others were moonlighting still, but it was a very small team of those of us who just wanted to start building. Raising capital was never even a gleam in anybody's eye. We were like, hey, we could just get some things off the ground. Like we've got the fortitude, we've got the vision, and I've got the customer journey. I like started to lay things out. And then slowly but surely over the course of, day over day, week over week, we started to put some things together and it started to feel real. And as tech does have the power of doing, it started to kind of, articulate what this could look like. And so then we assembled another small team, or rather a group, what we called the Alpha Group. And I had people on my couch, friends and neighbors, who I knew were on this journey, and their spouses. And we sat down on the couch and we had, an interview session, really. We just like served snacks and talked about what stuff is day to day, and had nothing to do with no mention of Orgo, but just really kind of validated a lot of our initial assumptions, started to gathered their feedback, and then put them into ultimately a user group. And then they started to test drive what we had built bare bones as our V1 of the platform. Coming out of that, we felt really convicted in the things that they were observing, the value that they felt, and we continued to build the product and on and on and on. But taking those measured steps of the first, I would say, 30, 60, 90 days, and then being compelled and feeling encouraged to kind of keep it going was absolutely critical. Without that plan and progression, I think there's a lot of shooting in the dark that otherwise would have happened.
Yeah. And then from day one, was it always the intention to have it be something built for like a really specific type of user, like the sports families, or did you have moments where you thought about, oh, maybe it's that plus another group? I mean, always like the more you can find a niche, the better. But what were kind of your assumptions going into it on that kind of specific user?
I started to read a lot of books. I do not like to read unless it's for business. And if I'm motivated by a new chapter or a new set of skills, in which case this entirely is, right? Like this is not something that I learned, being like founder 101, being a corporate for 20 years. Of course not. So there's like different things that I want to round myself out with. And one of the earliest things that I'd read, aside from, of course, doing hard things, was be special to someone until you're special to no one. And going deep and not cutting wide, riches in the niches, whatever you want to say, right? Like there's a recurring theme there where you're like, okay, so if I'm experiencing this problem personally and there's strong founder problem fit, and I can narrate this problem, I can design a solution about this journey in a very, very intimate and informed way, we will absolutely start here. So that was part of the thesis day one. But the challenge and opportunity, and still remains to be true, is let's design the platform that it is extensible. It is universal, such that when verticalization and other expansion opportunities come about, it's not an entire overhaul, it's not a rewrite. It truly is the next progressive path onto the next. So that is a story yet to be told, but the architecture and the premise of the technical kind of under the hood layer beyond what the consumer sees was always part of the design. So that is still very much true today.
Yeah. And then when you had some of those kind of early conversations, or even when you had, some version one of the app for people to test, did you have any assumptions kind of like going into those conversations, or getting the feedback that either proved right or wrong? And anything interesting that you kind of gathered in those early days? I'm sure quite a bit, but
the literal only premise that still again holds true today is, do you want to see time as you actually spend it? That's a question I have for you. Like, do you want to see 3 to 4 p.m. on Skylight? Which I'll actually speak about Skylight in just a second, because there's an interesting full circle moment with that. But or do you want to see 12 to 5 and all the steps along the way? So that was the basic most premise, that if we render to you this same event with this now additional layer of information, and the way that we coined it early on was 3 to 4 p.m. is 2D. It's a 2D representation, 2-dimension. Now I'm going to show you 4D, the depth, the breadth, all of the things that kind of make that be executable in the real world. Is that valuable to you? That was the first V1 kind of testing proof point. And the second that people really started to resonate with that emotionally and operationally, we're like, okay, let's continue to build out an experience around that very basic premise. But without validation of that very core kind of concept, it would be a no-go.
Yeah. Because I'm sure back then and even today, you probably have people who the first thing they might think is, well, there's a million calendar apps, scheduling apps. Like, why would I need one for this like one specific part of my life? And I'm sure the answer that you have to that, and what you're probably kind of proactively, trying to accomplish with marketing and branding and all that, is that answer you just gave, right?
It's the education, right? So different is not always good. Different requires education. Different requires a disruption of pattern. It maybe would have been easier for me to be like, listen, I just want you to feel super psychologically safe. We are another calendar app, but we have purple instead of orange. And then we have this. You like this or you like that, right? Like that's easier. And you go, you know what? I do like purple. I'm going to go with you. No, we go, stop everything that you think you know about what calendars are saying. Your calendar is lying to you. Like we say these things to kind of stop the pattern thinking of what you think you know. And so that disruption is unsafe. And so then kind of shepherding them through education. For example, if you go to www.orgohq.com, on our website, we're visual communicators, and somebody like a marketer like yourself, I hope that's music to your eyes, but we communicate visually because I want to show you. I don't want to just tell you.
Yeah.
So we're big on like present the experience, manage expectations, show the to be outcomes, time to value, accelerate that as much as possible. And that is an iterative challenge and journey that we continue to be on. But that is a huge part of kind of what we're up against, is that initial education of like, we're different incrementally. Here's why.
Hmm.
And I want you to embrace that, if you will, and then kind of give it a try and see if that unlocks, the aha moments that we hope that it will.
Yeah. And I'm guessing too, when you were trying to reach the first, sort of like the first wave of people getting feedback, people using it, trying, just people trying it out and getting that feedback, and getting sort of the reps in of kind of communicating that story you just told. I'm guessing a lot of that first wave were people in your kind of inner circle and friends, family, people that again, lived experience. So you've got a lot of people around you probably that are great for for getting in front of. Beyond that, though, like when you had to start thinking about, all right, how do we start to get out there and kind of like reach more people? What was whether it was marketing or just something more like boots on the ground, just grassroots? Like what was kind of the approach you took?
So not in the backyard. Beyond the couch of the trusted circle that we had initially assembled,
Yeah.
which was, again, a very controlled group, and they're still with us today, which is phenomenal. It was definitely not a backyard thing. I'm like, I would like to come to the backyard and really put a little pin on this map when it's good and ready.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be that testing ground. I'm going to go California. I'm going to go Texas. I'm going to go to some place that nobody knows me at, and just kind of iterate through that. So
Yeah.
a couple of things: guerrilla marketing, not dead, by the way, boots on the ground, not dead. I'd go up and down certain storefronts. I remember early on with my intern, we had flyers, like really janky, basic,
Yep.
hand cut, at home flyers, and we did a couple of it on the local kind of like downtown here, but went elsewhere. Pass those around, asked for nail salons to like have our little stands and display that at checkout. And they were so, small business supports small business, which is just an amazing like thing that's built into everybody's DNA. So that was awesome. And then every single tournament, every swim meet that we'd go at, and my husband and I, we did this, and he was like phenomenal at this, and thank God for him, because I get mortified. He would put flyers on people's cars, like Teslas were not safe. Into the door handles. Oh, you're a Tesla. Great. You're getting it on your windshield.
Yeah.
Like, we were no mercy, zero mercy with the flyers. And so there was a lot of those months where the free and organic users were coming in through those channels. And of course, online as well. I built in public on LinkedIn from day one, begrudgingly TikTok and Instagram in various waves and iterations, a lot of testing ground, especially in TikTok there as well. But just really putting my name and likeness out there, and being uncomfortable with being out there, but like narrating the problem, the opportunity, the solution, and so forth. So it was a lot of the combination of those things, especially initially when we were relying on organic, but we were also free.
Yeah.
So we needed users in the door. We needed to test drive. We needed to get feedback from them, and basically like an open beta. We were in both app stores very openly, very early on, subject to 1-star reviews, as it were. We're very, transparent with that. Didn't keep things under the hood. Didn't try to like, oh, no. Only when it's like perfectly shiny and polished will it see the world. We were like, listen, get in, get out if you must. Tell us what you think along the way. And when the time came to monetize, which didn't happen until like fall of last year, we finally put up the paywall, and we felt really confident about the value proposition, because consumers hard. I don't have to tell you.
Yeah.
Consumers really hard. They're really picky. They need a lot of bang for their buck, and they're going to be questioning, every step of the way. So we finally put up that paywall, and every investor, of course, would like to know, well, how many of those did you convert from free to paying? And the answer for us was none, because we rewarded them with 1-year loyalty play. We wanted to keep them in. They're contributing to our weekly active users. We need them on.
Yeah.
So that was another kind of, conscious decision, that probably not the answer that they wanted to hear, but that was the right thing to do by the very OGs that have been with us since day one. And so they're still, many of them are still with us on platform.
Yeah. And to me, that seems like an obvious thing, to have those early users to be like, hey, do you love the service? Like, okay, now pay us. Like that seems like that would be that would be uncomfortable and probably in the long run, probably the right thing to do, like you're saying, but
Yeah.
probably what some people
I don't know.
might not want to hear. What I'm curious, like in the time when it was free, it seems to me a pretty obvious thing that eventually it's a subscription service. But is that what you always envisioned? Did you think about other potential paths?
So one thing that we really wanted to do was abstract and protect the experience from ads, which meant that, we don't want to sell your data, definitely don't want to serve you things that are not accretive to the journey that you're on, in any way sort of distracting and so forth. And so for that, it was going to have to be a paid avenue toward that. One thing that we definitely debated early on was more of a freemium model whereby, there was the lower basic kind of tier, and if you wanted to integrate your calendars or if you wanted to add more people on platform. And I've observed others kind of finding what those value unlocking features would be, and it's never anything specific, and it's highly subjective
Yeah.
per user. And I really wanted to avoid those minefields, because you're going to piss somebody off and they're going to be mad, and then right when they thought that they were like achieving the thing that they came here for, you throw up a pay screen in that moment. Like, absolutely not. So we decided it was an all or nothing under those constraints. So if it's without ads, then you're going to get it for free for 7 days. We want you to totally feel the value fully, unrestricted, everything that it has up until that point. But we're very, open as far as like 7 day plus whatever. This is when that expectation comes. And so we've been kind of managing ourselves up until that point, but proudly leading with no ads, don't sell your data. It's one for the family. Like, bro, it's $6.95 per month.
Yeah.
Or $59 for the year for the whole family. Add your grandma, caregiver, pets, kids, whoever you need, get them in there. So we're not restricting by feature or by user. And for that, there is this kind of like netted, pay to play effect that's happening.
Yeah. And the whole ad sort of decision of when companies think about whether or not to do ads, that's such a dangerous, like slippery slope. Like you make that decision and it seems like, oh yeah, we could try it. And then it just can take things in a weird direction, I think. So putting your users kind of at the center of a lot of decisions like that, to me, that completely makes sense. Did you at any time, or maybe currently, even thinking about like sort of different go-to-market like channels, or like going through other organizations where ultimately it still gets in the hands of families and they're using it, but slightly different path of reaching them?
Yeah. So again, I don't have to tell you as the marketer that you are these are my learnings along the way, because I've been locked up in tech rooms for too long. And so this is the world that I had to learn anew. But yes, there's a direct to consumer play. Obviously, that is the ultimate user that we're trying to reach and whose pocket we will be in. But there's different ways of reaching them, and B2B2C is, of course, another way for us to get there. However, those go-to-market motions have to be happening kind of concurrently at the same time. So in an ideal world, by the time an operator, youth sports operator, or your coach passes us through to the family, and by the time it reaches you, I would like for you to encounter us in your feed at least once or twice previously, such that there is a foundational kind of awareness, not necessarily deep knowledge, but awareness. Oh yeah, I kind of saw that thing. Oh, I remember there's orange and some sort of something about logistics that they talk about. Okay, now I'm going to double click into that because it's coming from a trusted source, but it's also, combined with my own kind of preconceived notion about it, good or bad. So that's the perfect world, which means that both of those channels have to be lit up.
Yeah.
And working alongside one another, which, is obviously a challenge. But yes, B2B2C, 3 partners, and we are growing our partner network very intentionally with those who are mission aligned alongside with us, who put, families within the center of their operation. That has to be kind of like this basic, criteria that we cut through to be like, how do you think about, your coaches working closely with the parents? Are they on the same team? Are they working toward, similar outcomes? If so, here's a tool that can facilitate, getting the right people to the right places on time, and then making sure that handshake is even firmer than perhaps it is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I never want to steer these conversations too much into just marketing, but sometimes I can't help myself.
Oh, we can geek out.
Yeah, because I'm curious when any company has a product, and there's a little bit of that education that you talked about of just sort of getting over that initial hump of like, oh, how is this different than just like other calendar scheduling apps? What was kind of the approach for that content? Like you said, there could be the B2C path and then B2B2C but you still need that sort of air cover of just like lots of content and awareness and getting in front of people
Yeah.
and telling that story, and a little bit of that is education. How did you guys approach that?
We're
And
still, we're still trying to figure out and crack the
yeah,
formula. Like we're very, like we're running ads right now. Limited budget, yes, but we're also like very data informed and data led as far as, a lot of experimentation with this particular ad set versus one. It could be founder led. This one is more print based. This is more of a simple, maybe it's more of a carousel format. So a variety of different ways to see what kind of lands. And unfortunately, it's my face that continues to spin more than others. And when it lands into people's feeds, and I even like have seen people at a swim meet, like doom scrolling, and then my face shows up. I'm like, I am mortified,
yeah,
like
yeah,
literally mortified right now.
yeah.
But it's the thing that converts because it's a human and it, it's within it's native to the channel as opposed to,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a static print thing. But nonetheless, we're definitely experimenting with all those different variations. The print one that we're still spinning somewhat is one that shows a side by side where it says unicorn time, 3 to 4 p.m. calendar screenshot,
Mm-hmm.
and then human time,
Mm.
the breakout of all of those different additional components of that same event, which is kind of like, well, for those who are living on human time, like Orgo's for you.
Yeah,
So we try to kind of come at it for a little bit of a challenger standpoint, but yeah,
yeah. Um,
ongoing.
yeah, and the whole like founder led kind of marketing, which sounds like I would argue probably most founders get a little bit uncomfortable just being front and center and the face, and a lot of people just like, and I'm like this. I'd prefer to sort of just build in the background, deal with the strategy, and then not have my face everywhere. But you can't argue with like the lived experience, the nature of like what you're building and who you're building for, and the effectiveness of being in front of the camera, or in front of people face to face.
Yeah.
It sounds like that's probably something that you don't love, but it sounds like you're embracing it a
Part
little
of the
bit.
job.
Yeah.
It's part of the job. That's part of the job. So like this whole notion of like personal brand and like building in public, there's such buzzwords and
Yeah.
they're so bleh, but we do live in an era, especially now, where anyone can manufacture anything and you do not trust even, yes, a human face that pops up in your feed. There's so many of these things because again, my feed's listening to me and
Yeah.
I'm in this business all day. They're just like, da, 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 da. Like at the end of it, 10 seconds in, they're like, and I'm not even real. And you're like, damn it, she got me again. Right. So you
Yeah.
kind of have to continue to push up on people's humanity to be like, no, there's an actual human behind this that's embodying this problem, that's taken the time and the care to develop something that you as another human may relate to this.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe just give it another 10 seconds and see what happens. So
Yeah.
I think fighting against some of those previously unforeseen constraints pushes the human even more so at the center of the story. So I'm not apologetic whatsoever for building in public. I state that very, explicitly, directly within almost like a closing, footnote at the end of every LinkedIn post that I make, because I'm just like, I want you to know why I'm sharing this. This is just part of the journey that is, and it's a story that I unfold along the way. Follow for more, link here, so
Yeah.
human.
Yeah. And it's probably too, like, it all just comes down to authenticity too. Like if people can sense that and they can feel it, whether it's founder led or just sort of the more fluffy sort of influencer kind of stuff that's out there. I want to ask a question, and this doesn't have to be just about marketing. This could be something about product or operations. I'm just curious about, like, with AI, how I think everyone sort of has this knee jerk sort of response to like, oh, we need to have AI, in the product. We need to have it behind the scenes with our marketing or just operations being more efficient. What kind of use are you guys? Good use cases are you guys seeing with just using AI? Again, either with the product or just kind of running the business.
It's a really important question that I've taken a true challenger stance on, which is ironic because as a technologist who once again jumped ship just so I can wade within the deep, deep waters of AI and all these things. I'm just like, we good for a while, at least consumer facing. So here's kind of the stance. So under the hood, the difference is the answer is different than, what's above the fold.
Yeah.
So above the fold product wise, we've taken two specific leaps in the AI direction by enabling voice scheduling and image capture. It's kind of like table stakes. So talking about,
Yeah.
what other providers similarly offer in terms of value, we felt like we needed to match that, but also layer on our additional kind of unique value proposition in that when you do speak to and say, hey, I've got this appointment at this time. I want to stop by Starbucks on the way and I want to pick up my dry cleaning at blah, blah, blah. The multi-stop journey that's unique to us in terms of our ability to schedule, we do in fact reflect as part of that event. So you can add those extra level of details and kind of specify exactly how you want that journey to lay out. Image similarly, kind of captures all the stuff, but it will translate it into that expanded view. So there's that differentiator as well. It makes sense. It wasn't forced. There was already a precedent for it, and the consumer is comfortable with that particular use case. Anything more than that, I'm going, who's asking for it? Who's waking up on a Tuesday going, you know what I'm going to need AI to do? I'm going to need it to blah, blah, blah. And because we deal with children's schedules specifically as our very hyper personalized data set, I'm going, we're good.
Yeah.
Like for right now, there's a whole roadmap. There's a whole bunch of things that we want to do. We're testing this particular iteration of the product right now.
Yeah.
Under the hood, small team, we got to get a lot of shit done. Yeah, you better believe that we're optimized in many which way. I got 2 co-founders that are digital. I got, this little digital twin over here and that twin over there. Marketing obviously is definitely an area where we try to get as much of a boost as we can with brainstorming and messaging and things. Certainly on the Claude Code side, there's a lot of like optimizations and things that we utilize seemingly every month. There are leaps and bounds in terms of powering the way that we do the work under the hood. But above the fold, I'm really protective about what is the average consumer ready for, what are they asking for, and how contextually appropriate is it the thing that we're shoving down their throats only because it could exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I am kind of involved with a startup, and they're kind of building the product, and it comes up constantly, like almost like every other meeting, like, well, oh, what if we had an AI to do this? And it's sort of like at some point, especially when you're building, like you have to know that you're building something that can be really successful and you can add a lot of value without AI. And then you think, okay, how can AI sort of optimize it or support it or make things better, faster, a little bit easier? And then that's a slow, that's a much better slow way to think about it.
Great. And the other thing too, like I always think about this, maybe because I've seen tech bubbles, not to say everyone's saying like, oh, is a tech bubble. Of course, there's a lot of value. This is a brave new world. Totally. Yeah. I get that. I'm not a Luddite by any means. However, putting all of my technical eggs into this one basket, I'm just thinking like, when we used to have 2 data centers and redundancy, and I would always like, you have to like fail over one and like, bring up the other. Like OpenAI goes down tomorrow and I'm out of the water and my app doesn't work or my customers don't receive service. That sucks. I don't like that single point of failure as a technologist. So therefore the question and the critical ask then becomes, could AI do that? Sure. Should it? Does it have to? Do I want to incur those extra charges with usage and everything else? It doesn't have to. And if it doesn't, then let's kind of lean on it with, some other, measured, technically driven ways. And if we have to optimize that down the line, then so be it. To the user, it should feel magic. It should be like valuable and achieving all the different outcomes that they want. But I'm always asking, but why? Who's asking for it?
Yeah. I'm going to have to steal that because I think that's just like a good question to answer before you even like start to think about possibilities.
Ask it 5 times. The why, the why hierarchy, ask the question 5 times. You're going to get to the basic most, lowest common denominator. And it very well may be substantiated, but you'll know that it passed through the 4, preceding whys. And most of the time, most people stop or fail at the second why because there's no good answer for it sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's like the little kid test. Just ask why a bunch of times. Yep.
And just wear them down.
Yeah. Another question I have for you, and this might just be top of mind for me because I get this question from like other founders. And again, this is like more on the marketing side. Reaching families, you're really kind of specific target audience. How much do you think about influencers or like micro influencers and,
Yeah.
partnering and kind of reaching people that way. Obviously probably a lot you have to figure out with messaging and ads and figuring out the right, you know, uh, the right information about the user and like what's resonating with them before you do some of that other
Yeah,
stuff. But like, is that something you
for
think
sure.
about?
I think about it and I get tempted by it. We've tried it a couple of times. We ran it as ads for the original kind of set that came through.
Mm-hmm.
I personally have come to develop such a critical eye to hearing some of that content, because I'm used to being the one to deliver it.
Yeah.
I didn't love the way that it landed, perhaps from the authenticity point of view. If it sounds like an ad, I'm
Yeah.
not stopping my scroll. And it inevitably did. And so I haven't quite found the right partner that can articulate value. And I'm not saying I'm doing a good job of it. I'm not. I just would rather do a bad job on my own than having to like stumble through
Yeah.
many other attempts. So not quite nailing it yet. Yes, could be down the line. But the one that I'm really excited about is with student athletes.
Mm.
Those I've got some ambassador programs going with. Those I want first person narration from their unique point of view, from what time literacy means to them, which we can talk about in just a second, what it means for them to develop daily habits, what it means for them to develop independence, and how they're being set up with executive skills for life, and how youth sports is serving them, in the journey to come. Some of them are seniors and juniors and sophomores. Others are already freshmen in college, and they're kind of living on their own, understanding what it's like to be in control of their day and all the pressures that come down from it. That I'm very interested in as that first person narration. As a busy mom of three athletes, jumping from sport to sport, I'm sure others can do an amazing job. For right now, that voice is kind of is one that I'm somewhat personifying in a very
Mm-hmm.
cumbersome way.
Yeah.
But the student athletes, I get very, very excited about.
Yeah. Yeah. And that the idea of like time literacy, like let's talk about that a little bit. Like that is probably, I'm guessing, a big part of the education that you want, to be kind of part of the brand. And when you talk to people, you want that to come across. So talk about that a little bit. Like how are you, first of all, how do you explain it just in general? And then how are you finding ways to kind of reach people with that message?
Yeah. Okay. So that's new. So as a marketer, you'll appreciate that there are certain assets that we wanted to develop as our own IP. And there's very little in this world that is defensible moat,
Yeah.
right? Like anybody can take anybody's script, got it. And not to say even brand is either. So two things that we went up for with the USPTO, as a registered trademark,
Mm-hmm.
we really feel impassioned by Orgo. So Orgo stands for Organization on the Go. It's not Orgo for sports. It's not Orgo for families. It's generic enough. There's a whole bunch of other things that we want to do with it. Therefore, let's just go ahead and kind of protect that as an asset.
Yeah.
That was a year ago. We submitted for that very early on, working with our IP attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Love. We secured that, got the certificate, got it. The thing that really started to assert itself as I was talking more and more about the education and the process, this term started to like naturally come about: time literacy, time literacy. And I noticed that people would like perk up and be like, whoa, you just said something. Two words I know very well, but put together, tell me more about that. That's unique. What about that? So I'm like, okay, cool. So let me pull from my financial, services background unexpectedly. And I've lived through an era where financial literacy was a very important topic that, again, sounds obvious, but like all the banks and all the
Mm-hmm.
fintechs that have spun up, Greenlight, others included, really kind of came to terms with the fact that financial management is secondary, and managing your money secondary to financial literacy. It's a foundation. How are you going to manage your money if you don't understand how money works and
Yeah.
moves, and what relationship that you should be having with your, with your money? Let's teach that. That's a teachable skill. That's not something that's innate or we're born with. Let's do that earlier. Let's do that sooner. Let's do that with the children. Oh, cool. Let's do all these, payment apps and things like that. So that whole era like kind of came up, and I'm like, okay, drawing from that, similar here. Everybody talks about time management. Oh, that's my biggest number one resolution, right?
Yeah.
Everybody fails at it. January 30th, everyone's like, done,
Yep.
failed. But what about we're jumping ahead? Once again, there's a financial literacy, a foundational step that precedes that. Once again, develop your relationship with time. So the way that we submitted for it, and the IP attorney wasn't quite sure if we were going to get it because it's like a bit of a challenge to defend words
Yeah.
rather than like a logo mark. So we went after that and we said, in conjunction and supported by the utility that we build, that is Orgo, in that we tell time the way it's actually spent. It does build and develop this foundational layer that anybody, arguably children as well,
Nope.
can start to develop a healthy relationship around. And so the definition is, if I can remember it verbatim, it's like the skill and the ability to see time as you actually spend it in the real world and develop, and how it impacts collaboration with others. Which in effect is kind of like what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So, long story short, that's another asset that is, yes, an educational tool, a content pillar that we really want to lean into more so. But I'm really geeking out on this term. I'm super excited. We haven't even begun to like scratch the surface with it. But it's a major part of like who we are and what we want to teach and the impact that we want to have. And time literacy is this whole other foundation that will be supported by Orgo, the tool.
Yeah, no, and maybe that's just my marketing brain also like really perking up, because that makes so much sense to have a philosophy that behind everything that you do and everything you build. And like you said, where you might eventually kind of expand to other areas, but that sort of thread that is the through line between all of them. And it makes a lot of sense.
I'm excited about it. I'm like, that's a t-shirt. I'm like, ask me about time literacy.
Yeah.
R.
Yeah. And honestly, the first thing that popped in my head is that feels like that would make a great TED talk. and it would be, and it would be, I mean, it doesn't have to literally be a TED talk, but that type of a sort of educational
concept.
thing.
It's conceptual. It's a theory, like you could like really kind of make it and shape it in a
and the way that kind of stuff works best is when it's ends up being sort of like that'll make you think about that, but then the whole time it's like a big sort of commercial for Orgo without feeling like one, right? I mean, that's kind of
oh, and by the way, we built this other thing where you can actually build.
Exactly. Well, that's really cool. Anything else? I mean, that's a big one, but anything else that you're just kind of really excited about today as you look the next, 12, even 20, 24 months of just what you're building?
Right. So most immediately, if anybody's here a Skylight user, because you mentioned that, I want to come full circle.
Yeah.
And if the Skylight team is listening, come for me. Come. We'll have nice chats. So here's what we did. So I believe in interoperability, and I call for that as a call to action within sports tech specifically. I'm like, listen, let's share data. Let's get the APIs going. Let's serve the same customer and client. Let's stop it with the protectionism of schedules and things like that. So I like really kind of like, I'm a broken record about this. So if we're gonna, preach, then let's practice what we preach. So then we ourselves have become recently interoperable in that the value that we develop within Orgo, in that, the 3 to 4 p.m. then, becomes 12 to 5 p.m. We can then export that entire view externally to be subscribed by a different calendar. So then someone like a Skylight, who's got more of like that visual and, obviously a hardware representation of the digital, can see the 12 to 5. And it's a block that will come across and will have all of the detail that we uniquely have injected into the description of that event with start preparing at 12:15, leave the house at 12:30. You will drive to this location for this long, arrive early by an hour for warm-ups, as it were, the full game, and then come back. And Jimmy's going to be driving too. And then, Janie's going to pick up from. All of that detail is in there. Everybody's got their instructions, but the full block is represented and can be visualized within that tool. So like this whole notion of user's choice is one that I believe in. We deliver a sliver of that value. I want that value to be felt and experienced elsewhere across other mediums. Please consider this an invitation to take it and run with it for all that it's worth. So that's the other way of a philosophy, if you will, of how we think about the world, is interoperability, both internal within Orgo, but also one that we export that value elsewhere.
Yeah, no, that's great. I guess just one or two final questions, and this is sort of the really generic kind of question that a lot of people have in podcasts like this, but it's an important one, because I think if there are people listening who are, building, in the femtech space, building for families. You as a founder, or even pulling from your tech background, what advice would you give to people who are, I don't know, maybe just getting started or just have an idea, or are building and running into some of the same challenges you had, lessons learned, any kind of advice that you might have for them?
Yeah, for sure. Community, 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 which is why we're here. Famtech.org is a great organization. I belong to many others as well, where you kind of find your people, similar journeys, similar stages. Yes, pull from each other in terms of lessons learned, but also pull up into other rooms where those, have already kind of gone and evolved through it. So what's next? So you could see around the corners. You can get advice beyond the phase that you're in. Book me or other advisors on Hubble as well, where you can kind of get bite-sized pieces and get like really pointed advice for where you are, push through that immediate little mound, see the next, mountain up ahead. So just advice, advice, advice. Surround yourself with people that you trust, but not all advice is good advice. So just kind of know which to filter. But community, I think, is one of those trusted areas that you can self-select and hopefully, gain benefit from.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'll be sure to include, obviously, links to where people can find you and connect with you. But if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way, or how do they find, more information about Orgo?
I'm painfully available. So like DM me on LinkedIn, find me there, Zoya Lehrer. On Instagram, it's Orgo app. So ORGO app. On TikTok, it's techie sports mom. Don't find me there. It's a lot of experimentation. It's weird stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, so LinkedIn is great, and Instagram as well.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'll be sure to include all that when I get this episode out. So yeah, I really appreciate it. Really interesting conversation. I love having conversations with all founders, but especially when it's something that I can see on the horizon for me and my wife and my family, when it's people building, solving problems that I know we're going to bump into. So it's been really great chatting, and hopefully we'll cross paths soon and stay connected through famtech.org or any of those others that you mentioned. So really appreciate it.
The opportunity, Dan. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Zoya. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.